Well, thank you, everyone. Like Will said, my name is Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire. Just to start off real quick, a couple questions. Who here has not heard of AFP before? Okay, so not too many. So if you're unfamiliar with Americans for Prosperity, we're the nation's largest grassroots advocacy organization. We operate in 35 state chapters around the country. Soon to be operating in all 50 states. And what we really believe in is creating a society of mutual benefit where government coercion is not the default, but instead mutual transactions between free people is the best solution instead of government overreach. So we traditionally used to engage in really economic freedom type issues, but we realize that those issues don't always, removing those barriers don't always address some of the other societal problems. And one of those spaces is criminal justice reform and the drug war. So we started engaging in the cannabis space and criminal justice reform back in 2016. We were part of the coalition that led the effort to stop civil asset forfeiture. So we banned civil asset forfeiture at the state level and engaged on our first legalization bill here in New Hampshire in 2018. So I'll turn it over to Daryl to sort of introduce himself and what NH Cannabis does.
Sure, so my name is Daryl Eames. I'm a New Hampshire native, born in Berlin, raised in Errol, and living in the southern part of the state for the better part of my adult life. And the New Hampshire Cannabis Association was really a response to HB 481 in 2018,
Yep.
I think. It was the first we had heard that a bill had come out of the House, come out of study with an ought-to-pass recommendation. And we looked around and just kind of noticed there was no support mechanism for the people who want to work in the industry or own a business in the industry or invest in the industry or even be part of the cottage industry that supported cannabis companies. And so we started gearing up to launch. Unfortunately, HB 481 got shut down in that process, and when we became operational in 2019, COVID hit and everything shut down. So once we kind of figured out what that was, we decided if we could find a place to start getting professionals, advocates, and legislators together, and people that wanted to do it, we would. And so we officially launched, I think, in 2019, and shortly after, I think, I've been working with great organizations like the AFP to try and get the responsible adult use market here.
So second question, how many folks in the crowd live in New Hampshire currently? How many people live outside of New Hampshire? Just show of hands. Yeah, so all of you guys, the second folks, I expect you'll be moving soon, so hopefully you can help us with this issue. So we need more people here that believe in removing some of these barriers to help, whether running for office or for advocating for stuff at the state level. So it may surprise a lot of people that here in the Live Free or Die state, cannabis is still prohibitive. We have decriminalization up to 3/4 of an ounce, which is an arbitrary and silly number. It's sort of a joke when you go down to Massachusetts to a recreational store. They have what's called the Granite Stater deal, where they make sure it's under the decrim limit. It's all a big joke. We come at this issue from two areas. So the criminal justice area, where we still arrest, the most recent data we have, we still arrest 1,500 people, was in 2020. We prosecuted 1,500 people in New Hampshire for cannabis. And that doesn't even include all the fines and things that are distributed under the enforcement of the decriminalization law. So we view it as this would be a great bridge for law enforcement in New Hampshire to build trust with communities, because the vast majority of Granite Staters believe that cannabis should be legalized. Recent polling shows between 70% and 80% of the state wants this to happen. So just as a quick lay of the land, if you're unfamiliar, we like to say in our coalition that New Hampshire is on an island of prohibition. every single border around us has legal cannabis, and by the end of this year, we'll have legal recreational retail stores. Vermont is planning to open their stores sometime next year. So we have a situation where we have well over 100,000 residents of New Hampshire traveling across state borders to go spend their money on a product that is illegal in the state that they live in. It's a real circle of stupidity, if you will. And we still treat it as you know, this terrible product that you can only possess at these little arbitrary limits. So a lot of people ask, well, why hasn't the live free or die live free or die state of all places, why haven't we legalized? And that's where the more complicated question, the more complicated answer comes in, where in New Hampshire, we cannot do ballot initiatives. This is a good thing, by the way, for the, you know, if you care about freedom, direct democracy isn't exactly the most effective thing in the world. So the only question that can go on a ballot is a constitutional amendment. So we can't do it in the way that Massachusetts, Colorado, a lot of these states did it through ballot initiative. So the biggest question has been not if, but when and how New Hampshire legalizes. And it's that how question that has been the crux in the State House. The New Hampshire House was one of the first legislative bodies to pass a legalization bill back in 2011, but we hit roadblocks in the Senate constantly. It's been Daryl and I's just massive frustration of the prohibitionists in the Senate. But we've tried many different things between tax and regulate bill, similar to Massachusetts. Not one of our favorite things at AFP. We don't like taxes. We spend our time lowering taxes usually. So, you know, we want to create a system that's open, accessible, and as low government intrusion as humanly possible. So we came real close this year to at least removing all penalties associated with possession. We were one vote short in the Senate. But, you know, that's the real question, is how we do this. You know, I pass it over to Daryl to sort of give his thoughts on that process.
So it's been very interesting, and the one thing that I've learned is that, you know, we've got a very representative government in the House with about 400 representatives. The real issue is the Senate. You know, we really need to key in on candidates or incumbents that are pro-cannabis. For instance, Michael Yakubovich is here. He's running for Senate in my district, and he is a pro-cannabis candidate. So we really need to seek these people out, and it's not something that we can always publicize, you know, to our membership, because sometimes they are pro-cannabis, but, you know, maybe they also have the backing of the police unions, and that can get sticky. But I think the main important thing is we've only got 24 senators. If we only get 13 to sign on, it still goes in front of Sununu, and he can veto it. So we need 16. So we're going to be working hard. There's an election coming up in November, and I would say pay attention, find out who it is, let all your friends know, because if you want legal cannabis here, it's going to take every side of the aisle to get it done. And there are people on all sides and all aisles trying to get it done. So find out who they are and let's get them in office.
And, you know, in our view, this is an economic issue too. We're missing out on an enormous industry, one of the fastest growing industries in the country, and to continue this ridiculous status quo. We're even starting to see, we've made a lot of progress. We've seen a lot of former prohibitionists start to move along on this issue, because they realize we can't just keep doing this. We're surrounded, there are massive amounts of people that use cannabis, buy it legally in a surrounding state. And not to mention, we legalized therapeutic cannabis, so medical cannabis, back in, I think it was 2013. Yeah, 2013. That system is another thing that just needs a ton of work. Everything's vertically integrated. So the companies cannot be for profit. They are vertically integrated companies. So that means they have to cultivate, manufacture, and sell all the product themselves. And at first, it was very, very limited. You really couldn't get a medical card from your doctor. It was only for very specific things like cancer and serious illnesses. That has since expanded, thankfully, thanks to the legislature, to things like PTSD, and it's been expanded rapidly over the past couple of years. But it still doesn't, what we want to focus on at AFP is making a market that is more competitive and more free than every other state that's done it so far, because we're surrounded. So we want to be more competitive. We want to be the free state for cannabis. And, going the way of Massachusetts with their enormous cronyism or, enormous regulations like Colorado or other places, we want to learn those lessons and adapt them to New Hampshire so we're not making the same mistakes. I don't know if, Daryl, I'm sure you have thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's a lot of competing interests that want to have a say in this, and I absolutely get it. But the problem is, as soon as you start to make arbitrary decisions like making 60%, limit on vape cartridges, if people can go buy 98 on a dispensary right on the border or, from the illicit market, they're going to do it. So is that really part of solving any problems that you're trying to solve? So, it's really about threading the needle. But I talk to cannabis companies in every state there it's legal, and you would be amazed. It's imploding right now in California. They're too heavily regulated. Massachusetts is about to have a whole bunch of cannabis dropped into the market by large organizations. That's really going to affect the price for the mom and pop shops down there. That's a problem. And then you have places like Oklahoma where they went too easy, and you have these very large illegal quasi-legal, I guess, grows where nobody knows where anything is going. So, I'm a proponent of very light touch, just the right amount of regulation that will result in the widest opportunity for the people of the state, a high-quality product at a better price. So, just like we do with other, cigarettes and alcohol and all that, you'll have your native New Hampshire residents buying it. You'll have a portion of the 3.5 million tourists a year that come through buying it, and then you're going to have your border hoppers buying it. And I think that's probably one of the parts of the best solution.
So I want to touch on why it's failed here and the reasons behind it. So if you're unaware, New Hampshire's structure of government, we have 400 state representatives. We have 24 senators. The majority leader in the House put it very succinctly, I think, where the House represents the people, the Senate represents the lobbyists, and we have the least powerful, well, until the past couple of years, we had the least powerful governor in the country with a 5-member executive council that has to approve basically everything he does. So what that's created where we've had, no matter the party, Democrat or Republican, if for the governor, is that they tie themselves very closely to places where they can have influence. So specifically when it comes to law enforcement and the Chief of Police Association. They are the single largest lobby group against cannabis. Mm-hmm. They come and spread these ridiculous claims like it causes schizophrenia, things that are straight out of reefer madness of the 1950s, and yet it still makes an impact. And a lot of their arguments are, youth, we need to protect our youth from getting the devil's lettuce. We need to, it's something that, we can't have people, just freely buying all over the place, and driving, people will drive on it. And funny enough, the message that we really like to give representatives and senators is I share the same goals. We don't think that children should be able to access it. We don't think that, that we should be the dangers of having corrupted product. You should be able to buy a product and know exactly what's in it. the thing is, we actually want to get rid of those things. Because if you ask, I have said this to police officers here, if you ask a kid in New Hampshire, where do you buy marijuana, and they'll point you right to 5 kids in their class in high school. The way that you actually stop that is creating a legal market where adults can freely access it, but it's much more difficult for minors. It's very difficult to walk into the New Hampshire state liquor store and purchase a bottle of Jack Daniels when you're 17 years old. So those are the protections, and at the cultivator level, when we do set up a retail market and regulated market, we want very little regulations, but we do want required testing of the product so you know that it's a safe product that you're consuming. Because people are doing it now, for the driving claim, like we said, 100,000 plus use cannabis on a regular basis in New Hampshire. And that's probably a real underestimate too. So if they're driving now on it. So, what are you doing right now that's actually preventing the things that you claim will result from a legal market? And they have really no answer for that. So, like Daryl said, it's making sure, especially in the Senate, that we have aligned people that are going to stop the reefer madness and actually do something about it. And hopefully it will be a bill that, that we've been working on, that we can all get behind. And I don't know if you want to talk about sort of the coalition that we work with.
Yeah, so a lot of great organizations like the Marijuana Policy Project, Americans for Prosperity, the ACLU is helping, the NHLA has some representation, and then, legislators and advocates from all sides, really. But the important thing here, and I think that I don't know, I'm 48 years old. Nobody I know who did, consume cannabis when I was a kid had a problem getting it. I don't think they had a problem getting it when my parents were kids. I don't think they have a problem getting it now. So what are we doing? And if we do nothing, we're just exacerbating the same problems that they want to solve. And so for the people who stand back and are absolutists about this, that's my question to them. Because you're supporting the illicit market then. You're supporting youth use. And in fact, in one of the Senate hearings for one of the bills this year, it shows the age problem we have with some of our representatives, where somebody who's been in office a long time actually said to 2 high school students, if you wanted to get any grass, would you have a problem getting it? And yeah, it's just, facepalm moment, like really? But here you had 2 high school students saying they didn't want this to happen, and their answer was, oh, it's everywhere. What more do you need to hear at that point? So. We've got a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of people who really want to get this done in a way that provides for maximum liberties. I have some personal issues with a lot of this, because if you're a Second Amendment person right now and you go down to a dispensary in cannabis and by any means they find out you have a firearm on you, you're going to be jammed up for a while. I have a friend who has MS, but he's also a Second Amendment supporter. He won't go on the medical market because he doesn't want to lose his right to bear arms. So. There's a lot of complex issues here, but the first one is just enough is enough, and we need to get this done.
Yeah, and that sort of goes into, a lot of the reasons from senators that vote against it. At least the reason they give is, oh, this is federally prohibitive, and the famous question on the background check form when you buy a firearm. I'm a gun owner, although I lost them all in a tragic boating accident.
Yeah, me too. It was a shame.
Yeah. There is that question. I will point out that a week after the Senate killed HB 629, which was the legalization and home grow bill, a bill that did not set up a legal market, just said adults can possess this and you can grow at home. A week after that failed, and they were ranting about the fact that this is federally illegal, they voted on a bill that I personally agree with, which is HB 1178, which is a federal nullification, a state nullification of federal gun laws. So, if you come to my talk tomorrow on crypto, we'll be talking about nullification. It's an important signal to send to the federal government. But there has been a directive for over a decade now from the White House, from the Department of Justice, that they will not be enforcing their federal cannabis laws in legal states. One, because obviously they cannot. They would have to deploy the army to actually make any sort of difference, and good luck with that, at least in New Hampshire. So that's one of the top reasons, and I'll point out at the federal level, Nikki Fried in Florida, who's running for governor against DeSantis, is the agricultural commissioner there. She's suing the federal government on that exact question on the federal background check form for a firearm. It's likely to be removed, hopefully as soon as possible. The Supreme Court has repeatedly said that if they get a good, clean cannabis case that comes to the Supreme Court, that every federal cannabis law will likely be overturned. This was from Justice Thomas, by the way, that because the amount of conflicts in federal law about cannabis. They have no consistency. The federal government owns a patent on marijuana. That is a legit thing that exists, yet they prohibit it for adults to use across the country, and they ruin people's lives over it.
Aren't they growing some too?
They're growing it. University of Mississippi has a license to grow it. So the conflict there, when you look at the federal passed the House, died in the Senate. Representative Carol McGuire, who you might see the McGuires around, they're great folks, great champions of liberty in the House. She sponsors a bill almost every single term, which is the legalization in home grow. Passes the House, dies in the Senate. And we've had a couple other proposals just to take cannabis, the word cannabis, off of all state books. Passes the House, dies in the Senate. And these are things that no matter who controls these chambers, the Democrats or Republicans, this is the most, we work on a whole host of issues at AFP. This is the most nonpartisan issue I've ever come across. We were, like Daryl said, we work with the ACLU, we work with Marijuana Policy Project, we work with Rights and Democracy, and Black Lives Matter even engages on this. And we all see very eye to eye on this, that it should be low to no taxation, hopefully on the no end. But if we have to have some sort of tax, our proposal at AFP is to expand an existing tax, not creating anything new, and to have it be about 3%. Is our proposal as low as humanly possible to compete, but to at least appease some of the people that want the state to make some sort of money off of it. And then regulations, like I mentioned, the protecting consumers, protecting minors. There should be very little, if any, sort of intrusion in the licensing of retail stores. People should be able to open a store for a very, very low cost, and that's what keeps out what a lot of people on the left are afraid of, is big companies coming in and dominating Altria, a lot of these other large conglomerates that have emerged in legal states, because in Massachusetts it costs $1 million to open a store. And I know Daryl's super familiar with some of the ridiculous regulations in other states that we should probably avoid.
Well, being a finance broker, I mean, it's good for me if it costs $1 million, but well, in reality, you know, the vision for New Hampshire would be greatest access possible. So we're toying with some ideas where either the application and license fees are just absurdly low in general, or maybe scale towards the net worth of the applicants. We'd prefer not to see anything tied to a piece of real estate that you have to then purchase or lease before you can even get your actual license. There's a lot of things I think that we can do within the framework of a bill that haven't been done yet to accomplish that. You know, I'd like to see some priority given if our North Country farmers and agriculture professionals want to get into some outdoor grows first. All of these sorts of things I think can help. And that's really where we're targeting. And I'll tell you what, Ross, I'm sick of possession limits. Nobody cares how much beer you have in your refrigerator at home, and I'm quite frankly sick and tired of this 3/4 of an ounce or whatever it is. So we're going to work hard just to strip that out in general and say, you know, if you want to see some of these other things you want in the bill, then enough is enough on the possession limits. So, you know, those are some of the things we'll be fighting for. We're bandying about, one of the things that happened in Maine was the cultivators bear the brunt of all the tax, and the retailers are loath to raise their prices, you know, to a state where they're not competitive. So, you know, maybe there's something we can do where it is on the cultivation end when they sell to a dispensary or a manufacturing processor where they split the tax or something. So there's a lot of ideas that we've got, and hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of these in this bill to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that we're seeing everywhere else.
Yeah, and also avoiding a state monopoly.
Yeah, yeah. I'm angry I have to buy my liquor from the government now. I've just been so conditioned to it, so that's our next fight.
I'll touch on that briefly because it obviously made news. If you saw one of the biggest proposals of the past year was HB 1598, which the sponsor of that bill, Daryl, was a former prohibitionist, and I applaud anyone who came from that side and has seen the light and is trying to find a path forward. Unfortunately, the path forward that they came up with was absolutely god-awful. It was so a state monopoly of sales. We would have had New Hampshire state cannabis stores, which I think all of us pointed out, you know, the dynamic of having state employees sell cannabis, which is federally illegal. I think that would have been a pretty big problem. Not to mention the cultivation would have been private. So we would have had private cultivators building $1 million grow-ups with $1 million worth of product, and they only have one buyer. So I'm sure everyone here is very economically literate, opposed to a lot of people in Concord or in Congress. And obviously that creates a giant problem when you have only one buyer, one purchaser. What if that purchaser doesn't want all of your product? Is it destroyed? Are you going to have guarantees that the state's going to actually buy it at cost? And also that bill actually recriminalized edibles. So it did not allow for the sale of edibles, which we constantly were beating on a drum that edibles are 50% of the market. They are the safest way to consume cannabis. You know exactly how much THC you're taking when you have one of them. It is and the health negative consequences are obviously basically nil. You know, New Hampshire Cannabis Association is so important and has been such a critical difference maker in the past couple years. So if you live in New Hampshire, I strongly encourage you to get in touch with Daryl. They have networking all over the state. You know, you can meet people that are working in the industry. They're not working in New Hampshire, unfortunately, but it's a great networking thing to get involved in. And you know, we'll get to sort of action items of what you guys can do soon, but the biggest thing has been we have enormous popularity of this issue, but people do not, we have polling that people don't vote on this issue. It's just the fact, you know, it's an important issue that people care about, but they're not gonna really vote because of it, especially nowadays with all the inflation. and economic problems. It's not going to be a top-tier issue. But to put pressure on your representatives, on your senators, and let them know you care about this, that's been what's been missing.
Yeah, and it's, as somebody who abhors politics and has never really been involved in it, a lot of times people might just be too nervous to call their senator. But there's tips and tricks, right? So you can call after hours and leave a message. Then they're just going to get it the next day, and they do listen to it and they do count it. For those who are okay putting your name and your face on this, showing up at the hearings is a huge thing, because all these organizations that are opposed just parade every extreme sad case you could think of as to all the children are going to die, everybody's going to crash their car. The law enforcement person comes in and say this is going to cost us $88 million a year if you legalize it. I'd love to check his math. But just showing up, with a coherent argument and letting them feel your presence, that you're there, can have an impact. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. Any way that you can support, we have action item alerts, so we can let you know when bills are coming up. Our goal this time, I think, is to craft this bill and then start to actually talk about it, whereas this 1598 came out of thin air this year. Or last year, so we really want everybody to be knowledgeable about what it is, what's in it, why you should support it, and then that way you'll be able to talk more to it specifically when you're doing these things.
Yeah, and I know, the landscape has changed dramatically, just as more states have started opening stores. We've seen the Governor Sununu, who this is an issue that he's not the biggest fan of personally, but even he sees the writing on the wall. I'll point out, he makes the claim he's the most progressive cannabis governor in history. That is actually true.
Factually correct.
It's absolutely true. His predecessor, Maggie Hassan, vetoed any expansion of the medical program, vetoed decriminalization, and he signed those things, but it's been a process of trying to get him to support, taking the next most obvious step, which is actually legalizing it for adults. But recently, he's left that door open, and I'll say he was involved in some of the discussion of the monopoly bill, and he's realized that the status quo is untenable, and it's really connecting him with folks that care about the issue, that are educated on the issue, that can get him to see, and get, same thing with the Senate, get them to see that the best way to do this is so average Granite Staters can get into the industry, that we have safe product, and we can boost supply. We don't have so many barriers that keep back people from providing enough product where we're increasing supply and outcompeting our neighbors and outcompeting black market operators, so that it's very cheap and accessible to everybody, that every adult at least that wants to use it. We are free people in a free state. You should be able to consume a plant if you want to. Our thing at AFP, we're not saying that this is good for you and everybody should go out and do it. Daryl might be saying that, but we're saying that this prohibition, the perils of prohibition, are far worse than a legal market. You go to any legal state, even with the mistakes they made, it's been a huge success in removing people from the shadows of black markets into the light of day. It's made money for the states, it's made money for people, and it's, in my mind, one of the biggest things. It has wiped the records of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across this country that were being held back from getting apartments, jobs, school. The consequences of this being illegal are just enormous, and it's over nothing. We are in a quasi-legal state right now in New Hampshire. We are in this gray area because everybody knows everyone's going to these stores. You go down to Tingsboro, I've seen state rep plates in the parking lot at Nature's Remedy in Tingsboro. So
God bless them.
Granted, they're the ones that voted for it. So, but we have to change the status quo, and we need voices to make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible. We don't want a crony crap law like a lot of these other places have done. We don't need to make it hundreds of pages long. Just the short, it's legal, let's protect these areas, let's make sure these are the ways we regulate it, keep it out of the hands of kids, and go do.
Yeah, and on the business end of things, I really view the cannabis industry in New Hampshire much like the craft beer or even coffee, for crying out loud. We need to be able to have a leg up here to build strong brands, because at some point, cross-state sales will become a reality. And this is something for this bill, Ross, that hasn't been addressed either, is we need to make sure the day that happens, the handcuffs come off in terms of maybe any requirements on size of cultivation or anything like that, so that they can compete. But you make a good brand of coffee, with beans growing out in fertile soil somewhere, and you can charge $30 a bag for it, and people will pay it all day long. And I think that's the smart long-term move. Cultivation at scale is only going to get you so far. You're going to have brand loyalty just like we do now. I'm sure everybody in here has a favorite craft beer or maybe a brewery they love to go to, and so that's very much what we want to see for this industry for New Hampshire.
I dream of a day where, hopefully soon, where when you sign up for your Bardo Farms meat plan, that you can also get a bag of cannabis with it. I think just normal people, farmers that are doing this with tomatoes, with dangerous fertilizers right now, you should be able to trust them to grow this product and sell it. It's ridiculous to think that somehow it's more dangerous than selling some of these other products that we sell currently.
I'm going to one-up you there and say, I'd love to see the cannabis food trucks.
Yeah.
That to me would be amazing.
I mean, one of the biggest highlights of how ridiculous the current situation across the country is in Washington, D.C., in the district, it is quasi-legal, because obviously they're under federal control. They have federal police in Washington, D.C., but they legalized at the city level, and they don't have retail stores, but they have gifting. So you go to a food truck, and I don't know if they've shut them all down yet, but this was a real thing. There's the line of food trucks right down the National Mall, and right by the members of Congress who consistently vote against this stuff, and you buy a pair of $200 sunglasses and it has a big bag of weed attached to it, and you just walk away. And that's in the nation's capital, right next to the DEA. That's ruining people's lives over this. It's so absurd, But luckily, at the federal level in Congress, there is movement. I know nobody really has much hope for anything. I think they struggle to brush their teeth in the morning, but they do seem to be moving on this issue, and it's one of the few issues our federal team is really pressuring, especially the Republican caucuses in the House and Senate, to realize that this is an issue that, both parties agree on, largely, and the vast majority of the country would applaud them for, while, currently the entire country is flipping them the bird. So, it's just been a situation similar to New Hampshire, where you had, under Trump, with the States Act in the Senate that would consistently pass under Republican control, which essentially just reaffirmed federalism, takes it off the federal books, states' decision, and then the MORE Act in the House under Democratic control, which is, in our opinion, not a great bill, since it puts any legal cannabis under federal control. It would set up essentially a Department of Marijuana, which, similar to the Monopoly bill, who wants government weed? I don't think that would be very good.
Me, please. Can I buy my cannabis from the government, please?
Yeah, it would be pretty terrible. But the bill we're really pushing, and I'll hand these out after, so you can send your members of Congress a letter. It's the States Reform Act that's it's sponsored by Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina, who we just, AFP Action, our 527, just supported in her primary, and she was just essentially reelected. She has a general election, but it's a very safe district. And she went out on a limb in a very conservative red district in South Carolina, and is one of the biggest champions for legalization at the federal level. And this is the best chance we have, in our opinion, of getting somewhere, because it's the States Act, essentially, in the way it operates. It's federalism, pushes it back to the states. The only difference is to get Democrat support is that if states do decide to legalize, there will be a 3% federal excise tax. We believe that's a trade that we're willing to make, especially in New Hampshire, where hopefully the taxes will be basically nothing here compared to Massachusetts, where they have 25% effective tax rates. So, we're hoping that we get movement there. Again, talk to your members of Congress and tell them to start moving on this issue. Both chambers have passed something, so we just need to push it over the line. Some of the people that you would never think would support it are some of the biggest champions. Mitch McConnell is a huge supporter of cannabis legalization at the federal level. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the federal government actually does something. Just don't hold your breath, because you'll suffocate.
Yeah, and if you really want to make yourself furious, there's a gentleman named David Rabinovitz out of Massachusetts that's been involved in legalization for some time. He came up and did an hour-long presentation on how cannabis became illegal in the first place. And if you watch this video, your blood will boil, because right now, for all these years, and I didn't know this, I believe the Department of Justice could make a phone call and decrim cannabis like that without anybody else involved. And here we are, all these years later, all these people in jail, all of it, for what? We keep leaning on, well, we need the Congress, we need the president. We need somebody brave in the Department of Justice to wave that wand, and they could do it. And if you get the right person in, maybe they'll give them cover to do it. But learning that has really made me angry. So you can find that video on YouTube under New Hampshire Can, or you can go to hampshirecan.org with 2 N's to find it. Do yourself a favor and watch that, and you realize how ridiculous all of this is.
And if you want to, get involved here in New Hampshire on this issue, or nationally, please, visit our website, americansforprosperity.org. We have an action center right on there where you can choose the whole host of issues that we engage on, and you can send a letter directly to your elected officials, encouraging them to take action on this issue, on education reform, on tax reform, or coming soon, if you go to my talk tomorrow on cryptocurrency, making sure we get the government out of that area as well. So I do want to leave time for questions, but I'll just sort of finish with this, that there is a lot of progress thanks to Daryl and the coalition, that there's enormous optimism over the next year. We're going to make serious movement on this, as long as we have help from activists like all of you, putting pressure on people and supporting the people that are going to be doing this. So thank you all, and we'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Hi, my question was there any consideration in your organization or in the movement given to being the leader in a free market, a true free market for legal cannabis? I mean, you're talking about taxes and regulations, and I mean, I understand your state isn't perfect now, but it sounds like you have something close to legal, and it looks a lot like going backwards to me, so.
Yeah, and that is absolutely been one of our the way AFP looks at how we engage on issues is, can we make a difference? One, is it aligned? Is this going to make a difference in people's lives? Is it going to reduce the size and scope of government? And if we get involved, are we going to make a difference? There's a lot of Second Amendment groups. We don't get involved in Second Amendment issues. We're just not going to make a huge difference there. But we found a real opportunity. We were the first AFP chapter to get involved in this issue and set the stage for us now engaging at the national level. And the reason here, we don't have the biggest issue with criminal justice here, because it's a $100 fine for the first, decrim offense. It's quasi-legal. But, the opportunity we see as being the live free or die state is showing the rest of the country that you don't need these ridiculously long and intrusive and onerous and, bills that create corporate welfare and create these systems of cronyism, that we want to show everyone that this is the free market way is the way forward on this issue. It shouldn't be treated different from alcohol. Mm-hmm. And it's why 1598, the monopoly bill, is the only legalization bill in the entire country we have never supported. And it was because, we look at the prohibition of alcohol and what came out of that, and the terrible laws and systems that came out of that, and we still, 100 years later, have state liquor stores and state control of liquor in New Hampshire. I don't drink, I don't care all that much, but I don't want that for a new industry. It's gonna be very hard to ever rein that in. So having a system that is more free market, more open to average people, one, it solves all the problems they're afraid of. That it's gonna be big tobacco all over again, it's gonna be big liquor. The way forward is low regulations and treating it just like beer or any other product that we keep already out of the hands of minors, which is their biggest concern.
I just add real quick too that I think it's interesting because almost everybody involved that wants a responsible adult use market, we'd prefer to have very little to no, just protect the people that need to be protected and make it as open as possible. Unfortunately, you'll never get that past a legislator. That's just not going to work. But there can be good that comes out of this. I mean, one of the maybe only good things about 1598, the monopoly bill, was that they did tie some of that revenue to property tax relief. That's something that I thought was a pretty good thing to do. So we're hoping to, again, just do the best we can, because it's always what do we want versus what can we get past, and we don't want something stupid to get past. We're not going to get everything we want, unfortunately. So
I think we have time for one more.
Sure.
Well, my question is kind of about the distinguishing of medical and recreational. To me, the only difference to me is I have to pay 10% more for recreational than medical. Mm-hmm. So my question, I guess, is just have you thought about how much, kind of damaging possibly the distinguishing of those two is, considering the tax, I have every incentive to maybe lie to my doctor or something like that to pay less?
Yeah.
So absolutely great question. And one of the things we had to be concerned about with any legalization bill is that it will have an effect on the medical industry, and we're sensitive to that. I believe that the knowledge and experience that the medical facilities do bring to this is important. There are people who are suffering greatly, and this can help, and I don't want that to go away. And so for me, I think no matter what you do, for everybody who's got a cataract, wink, wink, and I need, my medical card, they're probably just going to go to an adult rec dispensary. They may even be doing it now. But I think there is a core service that the medical industry does provide, and that's why we always want to have a pathway for them into adult rec too. So they're not just limited at one small size forever on the medical side. So, great question.
Yeah, we basically need to, completely rewrite our medical law. Making them for-profit, obviously, is the most obvious thing to do. Failed to override the veto by one vote, and it was a representative that was in the bathroom. It was really an unfortunate thing. So, and in terms of use of money, just to go off Daryl's last point was, at AFP, we want this to reduce the size and scope of government. So taking any sort of revenue that we make off of it as a state, and obviously a portion, giving it to substance abuse treatment. Our thing there is actually effective substance abuse treatment, and then doing things that reduce government and help taxpayers like going into the statewide property fund and reducing taxes.
We're getting the
So,
hook.
yeah, so we're being kicked off the stage, but please, talk to us after. We'll be around. We have a happy hour right now up at the top of the hill. Yeah, and I'll be talking about cryptocurrency tomorrow at 1 p.m. if
Still
you
got
wanna
any of
hear
those
about
free
that,
beer
so.
coupons?
Yeah.
Hand them out.
But thank you all very much.
Thank you guys so much.